The Lord be with you. A reading from the Gospel of Thomas. His disciples said to Jesus, "Show us the place where you are, because we must seek it." Jesus said to them, "Anyone here with 2 ears had better listen. There is a light within a person of light, and it shines on the whole world. If it does not shine, it is very dark." Jesus says, "Love your friends like your own soul. Protect them like the pupil of your own eye." Jesus says, "If you see the sliver in your friend's eye, but you don't see the log in your own eye, when you take the timber of your own eye first, then you will see well enough to remove the sliver from your friend's eye also." Jesus says, "I took my stance in the midst of the world, and in flesh I appeared to them. I found them all drunk, and I did not find any of them thirsty. My soul aches for the children of humanity, because they are blind in their hearts and they do not see. For they came into the world empty, and they seek to depart from the world empty. But meanwhile, they are just drunk. When they shake off their wine, then they will change their ways." Jesus says, "If the flesh came into being because of spirit, that is a wonder. But if the spirit comes into being because of the flesh, it is a wonder of wonders. Indeed, I am amazed at how this great wealth comes to make its home in this poverty." Jesus says, "Where there are 3, they are without God. And where there is only one, I am with that one." The Gospel inspired by God. Namaste, my brothers and sisters. He was born in 1882, about 2 miles from the Blarney stone in County Cork in Ireland. And his name was James Murphy, and he grew up to be a consummate storyteller and also an incredible dancer. He was a great ballroom dancer, and also for a time he had his own school where he taught kids Irish step dancing. And he was a great musician. He played the squeeze box, and he played the fiddle, and he played the mouth organ, and he played the tin whistle, and he played the concert flute. You could give him any kind of an instrument, and he played for you. I didn't actually meet him until 1946, in October 1946 to be precise. He was my grandfather, whom I called Daddy Jim. And he bequeathed to his grandchildren the following gifts. To Aisling's father, Aisling is my niece back there in Shannog, to their father he bequeathed his musical ability. And to my sister Ethna, he bequeathed his dancing ability, and to me he bequeathed the ability to tell stories. But the story I'm going to tell you was a story he told me himself, and it took place in 1888. And at this stage, he's a little boy of 6 years of age. And it's during the summer of 1888, and it's a Monday morning, so there's no school, it's the middle of the summer, and his mother sent him down to the village, about 2 miles away, to buy a bag of sugar. And because he's a little boy of 6, of course, this is going to be a long safari. He's looking at every slug in the road, and he's kicking over every stone in the road. At that stage, Irish children didn't wear any shoes whatsoever. And he's taking his time going down, and he finally makes it to the shop, and he buys the pound of sugar, and he's on his way home, kicking the stones again and looking for the slugs again. And all of a sudden he hears music, and he's trying to trace the source of the music, and he begins to follow it, and finally he discovers where it's coming from. You know, outside of Blarney, County Cork, is one of the biggest fairy forts in Ireland. It's a huge structure, big circular mound, and local people are really afraid of it because they know the fairies hang out there. And you can hear the music coming from there. And because he's a little child of 6, he finds very quickly he can find the portal, and he goes right in. And he's inside in this huge underground cavern, and there are thousands of fairies from all over Munster having their annual Flach their annual musical festival. And they're playing all kinds of instruments. And so he sits on his haunches, and he's fascinated at what's going on. And at some stage, one of them notices him there, and they drag him in, and they give him a fiddle. And even at that age, he could play the fiddle. He's playing the fiddle with the rest of them, and their dancing goes on and on and on, and one piece of music leads to the next, and one dance leads to the next. And finally, one of the old ones comes over to him and says to him, "You better be going home now, because your mammy will be waiting for the sugar." So he goes back to the fiddle, comes back out through the portal, which closes after him, because adults can't find these places. And he's wandering back, and all of a sudden, he sees his mother coming, and his father coming, and his brothers and sisters coming, and all the village coming, and two big burly policemen coming. And they're really upset. And his mother grabs him to her and says, "In God's name, child, where have you been?" What he didn't realize is, it's now Thursday afternoon. So I want to talk about that today. I'll make 4 main points this morning. I'm going to talk about wisdom. I'm going to talk about cosmic laws. And I'm going to talk about karma, and I'm going to talk about map making. So the first one, the notion of wisdom. We've heard in the first 2 readings the idea of wisdom being promulgated. So what is wisdom? When the scriptures speak of wisdom, any of the scriptures, not just the Judeo-Christian scriptures, but any of them, when they speak about wisdom, of what do they speak? And if I were to give a one-line definition, for me, wisdom is that aspect of spirit that teaches us the laws of the cosmos. That very simply for me would be wisdom. It is that particular aspect of spirit, with a capital S, that teaches us the laws of the cosmos. And I'm spelling cosmos with a capital K for reasons I'll explain to you later on. It teaches us the laws of the cosmos. And so the first reading today is from Koheleth. It's sometimes called the Book of Wisdom, written about 250 years before Jesus arrives. And in this scene, it describes an urban scene, people going about their business with no wisdom whatsoever. They can't find wisdom. So it's an ordinary urban scene. And then the second reading is from the book of Job, and he uses miners digging into the bowels of the earth. But even these people don't seem to be able to find where wisdom is. And in the third reading from the book of Thomas, Jesus is talking about people being drunk. He came into the world to find everybody was drunk, but nobody was thirsty. In other words, they're satiated with the vision of this world, but they have no thirst for reality. So all 3 of these seers are really upset that wisdom seems to be unavailable. But the truth is, they all point out, wisdom is eminently available to all of us all of the time. But the vast bulk of us are drunk or asleep. And so in order to gain wisdom, to have access to wisdom, the first rule of the game is that we have to wake up. And this is why Gautama Siddhartha will give himself the name, the Buddha, the one who is awake. The first rule of the game of moving into wisdom is to wake up from our slumber and to get away from our drunkenness, and then we can begin to access it. And then it's available. In fact, spirit and wisdom is downloading itself constantly to us, and we keep ignoring it. We get hints all the time from deja vu experiences. We get hints from sudden insights, intuitive flashes, synchronistic events, teachers who come into our lives, illnesses sometimes do it for us, even bereavement do it for us. So these are normal ways in which wisdom is downloading information to try to wake us up. It does it more organizedly in a symbolic way through our rituals, through mythologies and storytelling, through art of various kinds, whether it's dancing or sculpture or whatever. It does it through liturgies, if we know how to do them properly. It does it through our dreams. It does it symbolically. It is constantly downloading wisdom to us, and we are constantly ignoring it. But when we begin to come awake, we can initiate the communication and initiate the establishment of the communication so that we have wider, greater bandwidth. And we do this through practices of meditation, and we can do it through our prayer life, or we can do it very powerfully through spending time in nature, regular time in nature, just watching how nature does it. Or we can do it very powerfully by spending time with little children, because children have immediate access to these portals and to these dimensions. So we find wisdom very quickly if you hang out and you take children not seriously as if you're studying them as a psychologist, but you're joining with them in their perceptions. And in knowing how to use your imagination correctly. And I've said this to you many times. For me, imagination is not just a faculty that allows us to make up stuff that's not real. That's not imagination. Imagination is the ability to download from one dimension of reality into this dimension of reality. Imagination is that faculty. So these are all the ways in which wisdom is coming to us spontaneously and we ignore it, and symbolically in our rituals, and in which we can initiate it from the other end. So this is the frustration of the three writers this morning, that so many of us are asleep and so many of us are drunk, and wisdom is available. Wisdom is trying to make herself available to us, and we're not responding. Which brings me to my second point then. Cosmic laws. Wisdom, as I said, is that aspect of spirit which is trying to reveal to us how this cosmos works. And I'm using cosmos with a capital K rather than a C. The Greeks used two different spellings. Cosmos with a C is merely this physical universe in which we find ourselves, a universe of galaxies and black holes in space and planets and solar systems. But cosmos with a K is not just the physical universe, it's also the metaphysical universe, those other aspects of spirit. But the cosmic laws, wisdom is trying to teach us the cosmic laws for this particular universe. There are a myriad of universes out there, and all universes are different, and they operate according to very, very different cosmic laws. They're as different from each other as football is from chess. There are totally different rules, it's a totally different game. The cosmos in which we live is like maybe a football game. There are cosmoses which act like chess games. So wisdom is trying to teach us what the rules are of this particular cosmos in which we have chosen voluntarily to incarnate on this occasion. And it addresses every level of this cosmos, because there are at least 7 levels to this cosmos with a capital K, just this one that we're in and that we're aware of. So at the very, very densest level, there's the physical reality in which we find ourselves, the level of the seat that I can knock on here. And so there are rules, there are cosmic laws about that. And these are rules which are studied by physics or chemistry or geology, pieces like that. So the cosmos is constantly trying, wisdom is constantly trying to reveal these laws to us, the laws of science. There's another level beyond that, which is the etheric realm. And these are the rules governing this, are rules governing energy. They're very different from the rules of science, very different from the rules of the physical sciences. And so, for instance, homeopathy or acupuncture are abilities to try to understand how these particular laws work. They're at a different level from merely the physical laws. There's a level above that of this universe in which we find ourselves, this particular cosmos, and it's the astral level. And at this level, there are different rules. These are the rules of learning how to deal with our emotions and how to deal with our dream life and how to learn how to astrally travel so that when we're asleep at night, we can actually visit in other realms. There are rules governing all of these things, and they can be learned and they can be taught. And wisdom is trying to download this information to us constantly. There's a level above that we call the mental realm or the mental reality. And this has its own set of rules. So for instance, here we find the rules of logic, or very importantly, the rules of pure mathematics, the ways of dealing totally mentally with the very real mental world. The cosmos is constantly trying to download that level of information to us. There's a 5th level above that, which is called the causal level. And this is the level at which we experience psychic abilities or psychic phenomena. There are rules governing all of these things. There are ways in which clairvoyance or clairsentience or precognition or psychokinesis, where all these things work. And the universe has all that information and it is constantly trying to make it available to us. But we don't listen to it. So most of the time we're not aware of how either it exists or how to utilize it. And then there's a level above that which is actually metacosmic, the level of soul. The individual soul is beyond universes. It's able to travel in all the universes at the same time. So at that level, we've transcended this particular universe in which we find ourselves. And then, of course, ultimately, there is Brahma consciousness, which is source consciousness, our guide, ourself. And so the cosmic laws pertain to all of these levels of this universe in which we find ourselves. And the job of wisdom, that aspect of spirit, which is responsible for teaching us how this universe works, that's what we're here to find out. And among all of those laws of this particular cosmos in which we currently find ourselves, there's one law which is maybe of primary importance, because when we understand this one law, it's very easy for us to figure out the other laws. And it's called the law of karma. So the law of karma is an introduction into how the other laws work. So that's my 3rd point. I'm going to talk about the law of karma then. So what do we mean when we think about karma? Very, very often we misunderstand what karma is. Karma, in fact, is, I'd put it this way, it's the simpleton's guide to how life works. The law of karma is the simpleton's guide to how life works. It's a very simple law. It says, if you do A, B happens. If you like B, keep doing A. If you don't like B, stop doing A. It's a very, very, very simple law. And we constantly ignore it. We ignore it in our business dealings. We ignore it in our treatment of the earth. We ignore it in our interpersonal relationships. We constantly ignore it. It's the simplest law of all. And when we learn that law, we can deduce and infer all of the other laws. Now, the law of karma is not punitive. It's not a God up there out to get us, not some kind of a distant, demanding deity who's out there to trip us up. It has nothing got to do with this. It's the way this universe works. We agreed to come into this universe, and this law of karma says, okay, you can learn the rules very, very simply if you learn this rule first. Just watch what happens when you do A. If you like it, keep doing A. If you don't like it, stop doing A. Whether the you they're talking to is an individual person, or a group of people, or a nation, or a religion. It's really, really, really simple. And the law of karma operates in 3 time capsules. The first one is immediate time feedback. There's a time capsule where there's immediate feedback. So I'm hammering with the hammer, and I hit my welt to my thumb, and I go, ah! That's immediate karma. I'm not going to hit it again in the next 5 minutes. It'll take at least half an hour to hit it again. So that's karma with immediate feedback. And there's karma with a deferred feedback. And this is karma where I don't actually get the feedback until much later in the same lifetime. And so, for instance, I decide I can get by with a diet of French fried potatoes and burgers and whatever, and I can do that for 30 or 40 years. And then I reach age 63, and suddenly I have an acute attack of diverticulitis. That's deferred karma. I put it off for 63 years, but it's in the same lifetime. And then there is karma that comes in a next lifetime, where, for instance, let's say I have a tremendous prejudice against a particular group of people. It can be because of their skin color, it can be because of their religious belief system, whatever. So I've got this extraordinary prejudice against a group of people, and I maintain it my entire lifetime. And then I reincarnate as one of them. And now I get to feel what it's like to be discriminated against simply because of that accidental characteristic. So that's karma that's deferred for another lifetime. Karma is a paradox in the sense that it is totally impersonal and it is absolutely personal. It is totally impersonal in the sense that it's the same for everybody. Cause and effect is the same for everybody. This law does not discriminate among people. So it's totally impersonal. It doesn't have anything against you when it operates. At the same time, it's totally personal because it is tailor-made to your life. Because of the unique decisions and choices you make, you will have very unique feedback and very unique karma, positively and negatively. Karma is not just a negative thing. It's the feedback from the good things you do as well. So it is deeply, deeply personal as well. And so karma is like the following. If you want to learn, for instance, the rules of basketball, there are 3 ways of learning the rules of basketball. You could get a coach who will teach you what the rules are, or you could check out a book from the library and it will tell you what the rules are, or you could just join in a game and by trial and error infer or deduce what the rules are. Now, in living our life, we have access to all 3. We all have coaches. We call these people mentor figures, or for big groups of us, we call them avatars like Jesus or the Buddha. So we all have coaches available to us to learn the rules of this cosmos in which we live. And we can all check out a book from the library. It will be wisdom literature of some kind or other. It'll be maybe a scriptural tradition or great poetry, Rumi or Hafez or William Butler Yeats or somebody, or Rilke. So we all have access to libraries where the rules are available to us. And all of us are in the game. And so if we got our eyes open, we can begin to infer really quickly and deduce very quickly how this game works, as long as we're awake, as long as we got our eyes open. But if we're not awake and we don't have our eyes open, the avatars aren't going to make a difference, and the scriptural traditions aren't going to make a difference, and actually engaging in life is not going to make a difference. Which brings me to my 4th point, map making. There is a fallacy in philosophy which is called the myth of the given. And the myth of the given is the belief system that reality is conferred simply by taking information through our senses and processing them in this little laptop we hold between our ears. And so all of reality is simply our senses soak in information from the real world, and this little laptop processes them, and then we spit out, and the map is an accurate one-to-one representation of what reality is. That's totally ludicrous. It's totally ludicrous to claim that what our senses take in and what our brains process is actually an accurate map of what's out there. Suppose you only had one sense. Suppose, for instance, that the only sense you had was a sense of smell. You can't see, you can't hear, you can't taste, and you can't touch. And now you're going to make a map of reality, given that the only sense you have is your sense of smell. How good a map of the world is that going to be? Be a pathetic map of the world. And still we operate as if the 5 little senses we have, with their very, very limited bandwidth, and this tiny little laptop that we got between our ears, 1350 cc of a laptop, that's going to deliver to us an accurate representation of what's out there. It's totally ludicrous. But we operate, we create maps from that thing. Let me use a food analogy again here. Suppose you were brought up in a culture in which the only known food source was potatoes, and the only known cooking mechanism was boiling. Then you would be brought up in a diet of mashed potatoes. In other words, you'd be Irish. And then you go out to travel and you realize there are thousands of different foodstuffs in the world, and there are hundreds of different ways of cooking any one of these things. And now you've got an extraordinary ability to taste very, very different foods. Well, unfortunately, only the mystics, it seems, and the children seem to realize that there are thousands of different foodstuffs out there and that there are hundreds of ways of cooking them. The rest of the world is getting by on a diet of French fries, and then we wonder metaphorically why we have obesity and diabetes and such ill health in our world. I'm talking this now as a spiritual metaphor. So the senses are like our food gathering techniques, and our mind is like our cooking ability. If we really, really think that our senses are delivering all of the information out there, and our little laptop is capable of processing all of that information, we're fooling ourselves. Only children and mystics know that that's not the case. And so children have discovered the cornucopia. Children are not who they are simply because they're refusing to grow up. They're not just living in a fantasy world. They haven't yet been persuaded to reject their access to other dimensions. And mystics are not just these impractical fools who believe in fantasy worlds. They're people who have rediscovered where the portals are and what the dimensions are, and therefore they're able to feast on esoteric and exotic food stuffs. For everybody else, except the children and the mystics, we live in a disenchanted world. We need desperately to re-enchant our world. We need desperately to learn ways to re-access those dimensions, to find those kind of portals that my grandfather, Daddy Jim, found in 1888. They're real. They exist on different levels of reality, maybe not the physical level, but the etheric level, or the astral level, or the mental level, or the causal level. They're totally real. When we attempt to continue to make our maps of reality from this one dimension, and these 5 tiny little senses, and the limited range of these senses, and a tiny little laptop, we find ourselves in the kind of world in which we find ourselves at the moment. Not only that, we're like people, primitive people, living on an island, and we don't believe that there's anybody else living in the world. And so we don't travel over the water because there's no point. There is nobody out there. The mystics are the people who have learned that there are many others out there beside ourselves. And the teaching today from Koheleth, and the teaching from Job, and the teaching from Jesus is to try to persuade us, will you for God's sake leave the drunken state, and will you wake up from your sleep? There is a world out there. There are other dimensions out there. There are other beings out there. They're real. Break through your disbelief. And then you can learn how to get there, and then you can learn that there are actually maps to help you navigate when you do get there. Bon voyage.